viaduct. It was built about 120 years ago in 1867, and it was built entirely out of wood. It was a major engineering feat of its day, but of course nowadays it's virtually taken for granted by the thousands of train passengers that cross over it every year on their way to a holiday in Wales. Put simply, bridges are just things to get you from A to B when there's something nasty in between. But it wasn't until 1980 that people realised just how important the Barmouth Bay Viaduct was. For 117 years, trains carried locals and holidaymakers along the Cambrian coastline of Wales, a vital link between the coast and the rest of Britain. But on October the 12th of that year, it was closed by a worm. And this is it, the teredo worm, a variety that used to eat wooden ships. The damage was found quite accidentally by a group of workmen doing some routine work on the supporting piles of the bridge. Their barge knocked into the bridge, knocked off a bit of wood, and this is the sort of thing they found. It was absolutely full of holes made by the worms. And of course you couldn't see it at all from the outside. The problem was, suppose all the piles of the bridge were affected in this way, it would be extremely dangerous. So they had to stop the trains at once. With the viaduct closed, its importance became obvious. The rail link was obstructed by the half-mile-wide Morthok estuary. Pretty to look at, but difficult to cross without a bridge.
All change on the hunters and the buses.
So the trains had to stop at Barmouth, and the passengers had to get out and get on the bus. Fair enough, but of course if you go by train across the estuary, that took only about 5 minutes. But if you had to get on the bus and go right around the estuary, that could take you nearly an hour. Travellers were not pleased, and so urgent repairs started. The supporting piles had to be replaced, encased in concrete or chemically treated to protect them from yet another attack of the teredo worms. £1.5 million later, the vital rail link was reopened. Whatever you decide to make a bridge out of is going to have to carry a lot of weight and withstand some very powerful forces. And there are 3 particularly tough ones. The bridge may be twisted, or it may be pulled, or it may be crushed. Now, early bridge builders only had wood and stone to build their bridges with, and they used mostly stone because it lasted longer. And so this type of bridge was very popular. The arch is a pretty strong construction. This is only a model, and yet it holds my weight quite safely. There's no wires or strings holding it together. It's just held up by the sheer weight of the bridge crushing the bricks together. Now, these bricks are actually wood, but they work in the same way as a stone bridge. But an easier way of bridging the gap is to have a straightforward beam, like this one here. But a beam behaves in quite a different way. This beam is actually a plain concrete lintel. It's the sort of thing that supports the bricks of a house above the door or a window. And over here, we have a model of one. These 3 plastic tubes represent 3 thin layers through the lintel. One at the top, one through the middle, and one at the bottom. Each of these tubes is filled with coloured water and connected to these over here. Now, when I press on the centre of the beam, look what's happening to the water levels. The top one is rising, the middle one staying the same, and the bottom one is going down. The water levels give a clue as to what is happening in the beam. Well, we tested that beam over there to see just how strong it really is. Take a look at this. The beam is supported at both ends, and the middle is forced down by a hydraulic ram. The force is measured in kilonewtons, so divide the number by 10 and you get tons. Wait for it. There, 3.69 tons. OK, now for a cube made from exactly the same concrete. The cube is compressed, just like the stone blocks in an arched bridge. Remember, the beam broke at 3.69 tons, or 36.9 kilonewtons, and the cube is already under a much bigger force, well over 600, and it's still rising.
1,261 kilonewtons.
Well, it's pretty obvious that plain concrete beams aren't very strong, which is a pity really, because it would be much easier to make a bridge from beams. But there is a way of making plain concrete beams stronger.
This is one of the casting beds at British Rail's concrete works in Taunton, where they specialise in making very strong beams on a gigantic scale. They do it with the aid of a bunch of long steel cables. The cables are laid out along the length of the casting bed. Each cable is being hydraulically stretched so that the force on it is the same as hanging a 4.5-ton weight on the end of each one. The beams are cast in moulds built around the cables so they pass right through the length of the beam. Great care is taken to make sure that the concrete gets into every nook and cranny in the mould. So the cables are well and truly trapped inside the beam. The concrete sets hard. The trick in making the beam strong comes when the tension is released from the cable supports at the end of the casting bed. Remember that the cables are trapped firmly inside the hardened concrete beams. So as the cable supports relax, compression forces are built up inside the beams. The beams are squashed along their length as the cables inside try to pull each end of the beam towards each other. The force is so great that it causes the beam to bend up by a few centimetres in the middle. It's these forces trapped inside the pre-stressed concrete beams that gives them enough strength to be used for bridge building, and that's something that British Rail do all the time. British Rail's civil engineers often have to build a complete bridge in a single weekend. That's the only 48 hours that trains can be stopped to let them work. Pre-stressed concrete has helped them a lot because they can make the whole bridge in bits over a period of weeks as a kind of construction kit. And then they put it together very quickly at the building site. All that's needed are some reinforcing bar and ordinary concrete to join the bits together.
Now, you wouldn't believe this, but this strip of paper is holding 5 kilograms. Now, with me is Frances Evans, who designs and builds the models you're going to be seeing during the show. But first of all, she's going to show us how to make some strong things out of paper. This really is paper, isn't it, Frances?
Yeah, it's just ordinary paper, Jarton. Look, drawing paper.
Well, are you surprised that this is holding up 5 kilograms so easily?
Well, no, because the paper there is in tension, and it's very strong that way. When you're pulling it, it is strong.
Tension is a pulling force?
Yeah. Just like put some more load on.
weights on. Let's see how much it'll take.
Well, let's try another big one.
Ooh, gently does it. Yes, 10 kilograms, no problems. Keep banging them on. 11. 12. 13. Oh, wow. 14. That looks like 15 kilograms inside. What about on the big one? Let's just see if it can take the big 20. Yep. Yes. Not bad, that. It held just 20 kilograms. Isn't that astonishing? Now, listen, you can use a rig like this yourself to carry out some interesting experiments. You don't need fancy metal bits like this. We've got some wooden ones here that Frances made. How did you make these, Frances?
Well, these are just plywood, Jarton.
Yeah.
And you see, I put some rubber there to protect the paper a bit.
Right.
And then, of course, that one goes underneath to hang the weights from.
Tremendous. And, of course, when you're doing this experiment, make sure you've got a bit of old cloth or a bit of matting down there, because, first of all, it'll stop the weights damaging your floor. And, more important, you don't want them to roll onto your foot. I mean, as you've seen, there's a lot of weight involved there, and it could be quite painful.
For goodness sake, keep your feet out of the way. Yes.
Right, OK. Now listen, when you do your experiment, use different widths of paper and compare them, and also compare your results with different types of paper. But keep the length between this support and the weight support constant. Now, you've got a sheet of paper. When you're cutting your strips out, cut some vertically, but also cut some horizontally, and compare the strengths between these two types, simply because paper has got a grain in it, which means that you may well find a different strength between bits cut one way and bits cut the other way. Mind, to me, paper isn't a strong thing, Francis. What would you do with it?
Well, you saw how strong it is actually if you pull it, Jarth.
Yeah.
Because it's weak if you push it like that, or if you bend it. But if you roll it round, for instance, like that into a tube,
yeah,
it is very strong when it's pushed. I mean, look at this. We'll get some of these weights. And onto this tube, let's try 5 kilograms.
Gosh,
Happy?
no problems, yeah.
Yeah, let's put another 5 on.
And I'm right in saying that tube was just made from one sheet of this paper,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
So what are these ones lying here, then?
Yeah, well, there's the other thing, that's bending. See, you can put ribs on the paper, and that'll make it a lot stiffer when it bends.
Yeah.
But you see what happens here? As that bends, the ribs lie over flat, so the paper can actually go into that bending
Right, yeah.
form. Now, if you get another piece of paper and you put ribs across the ribs, that gets a lot stiffer. You feel it, Jarton?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is all paper as well as ribs. This is all paper, just a little bit of glue, but does make a lot of difference.
It is just paper, yes, Jarton.
Right, tremendous. Now, you see that sort of structure in all sorts of unlikely places. Look at this here. This is a door that you might find at home. It's solid, it's hard, it's tough. But have a look and see what's inside it. OK, Francis? By the way, don't play with circular saws yourself. Leave it to the expert here. There we are. Inside the door, you can see it's just bits of stiffened paper, almost cardboard, but nothing stronger than that. And in fact, if I rip the door apart, you can see how it's arranged in this sort of cellular form. And as I said, it's only paper, and I can squash it to show how weak it is when you really want to destroy it. Great. Now it's your turn. You're going to have a go at our bridge building competition. You can use 150 grams of paper, which is about this. Use any type you like, but hopefully you'll come up with something like this. Isn't that just the business? Now, Francis made that. That's Francis's bridge. Tell us a bit more about your competition, Francis.
Well, this is the sort of thing I do with my students at Sheffield Poly, Jarton.
Right.
You see, these bases here are 450 millimetres apart that
Yep.
you rest the bridge on, and you put the load in the middle on a little pad that size.
Yep.
And here you've got a pivot so that the long bar here is a lever, and we hang the weights from that end.
Yeah.
Now, that's twice as long as that. Any weight there is doubled on there.
So if I put a 1 kilogram weight here, the bridge is going to feel a weight of 2 kilograms in the middle.
That's right, Jarton.
OK, well, this is tear-breaking stuff, but we're going to have a go at destroying your bridge, Francis, and
OK.
see how strong it is.
I'll tell you what's happening to the bridge while you're putting the weights on,
OK,
Jarton.
well, I'm going to start off with a biggie. This is 10 kilograms. That's about all I can carry, never mind the bridge.
And the bridge is just sort of settling a little bit, not doing anything.
Right.
We're starting to get wrinkles forming on the sides. It's almost like when you pull a piece of paper and it forms those long wrinkles.
Well, here comes another 5 kilogram weight to go with the 10. What's happening now?
And it's starting to bend a bit sideways.
OK.
Oh, dear.
Here's another 2. Oh, that was
That's it. So it's
Cool.
taken... how
There's
much is it?
17 kilograms on there. It broke just on 17.
Yeah, the arch failed first there, and then the bottom tore.
Oh, what a shame. Mind, it was feeling an effective weight of 34 kilograms in the middle of the bridge. Not bad. But if you want the big challenge, look at this. Only 80 paper, that's what it looks like. And that's how much it weighs, about 80 grams. You use 80 grams of paper and 2 tubes of adhesive. And theoretically, it should be possible to make a bridge that will support the weight of a person, which should be about 50 kilograms. Think about that.
40% of our bridges were built during the 18th and 19th century, and nowadays carry much more weight than they were originally designed to. This bridge is the subject of a rather unusual experiment. The Transport and Road Research Laboratory are working on a method of testing the safety of bridges, but first they are trying to understand how an arch bridge like this actually works.
Hydraulic jacks put pressure onto a thin strip across the bridge. The engineers expect the bridge to break in 4 places. Under the hydraulic jack, at each end where the arch joins the abutments, and here. As the pressure goes on, cracks begin to appear. The pressure is gradually increased. And then, at nearly 29 tons, things really begin to happen. Pretty spectacular. Look at it again in slow motion.
So, Francis, what was happening to the forces in that bridge?
Well, you can see it better, Terry, if you look at it on this model. See, it looks like an arch. Well, it is an arch, with this difference that it'll actually wobble up and down into different shapes. Now, when you take the weight that's resting, the bridge's own weight and the weight on it, the brake comes downwards, but then it's transferred by the bridge, and it takes it down sideways into the abutments.
Down to these supports here.
That's right, and they're taking a tremendous sideways force or thrust. Now, the bridge wobbles because the blocks are curved. Being curved, it means they only touch at one place, and that one place is where they have to be pushing.
Right, yes, they're touching there, so they're pushing there as well, and there, and all the way down to here.
That's it. After all, they can't push where the bridge isn't.
Yeah.
So, look, you can see it better perhaps with this. If you put that alongside it, where the blocks touch, see, that curve is the line of force or the line of thrust through that bridge.
All the way through to the end.
Yeah.
Okay, right, so what was happening to the bridge on the film then?
Well, remember, they put all that load down on that part of it, and so the forces on the bridge, the weights on the bridge had changed a lot. The best thing is, put some of these weights on. That's about the right place.
Okay, I've got 3 kilos here. Will it take it, do you think?
Well, try it. Yeah, it's going all right.
Oh my goodness, well the most obvious difference is the arch is now a totally different shape.
Yeah, but that's not the thing to look out for. The thing is the point where they're touching. Can you trace it with your finger?
Right, it's touching here, which is pretty well where it was touching before, I think, and here, getting a bit higher there.
Yes.
Nearly up to the top there.
That's one of the danger points.
Yes, and down into the middle again here, and it's right on the edge there,
And that is a real danger point. It's going to form a hinge there. The line of force will get outside it and go... But let's put this alongside it, and then you can see it. The kink comes just about under the weights, and there we are.
There you can see the shape that the lines of force are taking.
And then there's a sharp change in direction just under the weights, and then it runs down to the abutments.
Back down to the support over here. I'll put a bit more on, right. That's another kilo going on. Do you think that might do it?
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's almost as spectacular as the real thing. Well, this bridge uses pushing forces, but what about some pulling forces? Over to you, Jarton.
Finally, you may think that suspension bridges are totally different from arches, but the forces work on them in a similar way. Now see if you can make the connection.